Flory Models, I'm Philip Flory, and for the next few hours hopefully I'm going to guide you through the basics of modelling. Perhaps you're coming back to the hobby, perhaps you're starting it out for the first time and you want to know what it's all about. Me, I've been modelling now for the best part of 35 years, long time. Okay, I've been a professional model maker for the last 10 years full-time, okay, and probably part-time 5 years before that as well. I've had my work in various magazines, on the internet, and you probably all know me via YouTube and stuff like that. What I'm going to hopefully do over the next sort of few hours is take you through the basics of what you're going to need, what are luxuries you don't really need, and then obviously talk about some of the kits. Then what we're going to do is going to work through three quite iconic kits we've got here. We've got a 1/72 Airfix Spitfire, relatively pretty cheap. We've got a de Havilland Vampire, okay, a little jet one there. Got something a little bit bigger, which is quite a troublesome kit, shall we say, is the Harrier, so we can work through some of the problems that you're going to face with everyday kits. Now, we're going to talk about kits and things like that a little bit later on, and the fors and against and everything else like that, but for this episode what we're going to do is talk about the tools, why we use them, why we don't, and what we need. So down here in front we have a selection of what I use every single day, okay. Might be a little bit different to obviously your setup, what you're using. Obviously with this hobby, the great thing is everybody's different. Everybody has their personal favourites and the reasons they use them and why they don't and things like that. First of all, a little bit different is the knife. Now, this knife here, as you can see, is one of your cheap disposable, buy about 100 of them for £1 disposable knife, okay? The reason that I like these, first of all, I am a total klutz when it comes to modelling. If I use the scalpel type, okay, which is probably what you know through the hobby, I will cut myself open. I found by poking out a little bit of blade at the end, and that's all I need, I can do everything just as well as using the scalpel type. Now, if you've got a craft knife, the proper one with all your different blades, absolutely fine, okay? If you're happy to use that, no problem at all. Me personally, it was just that I moved on to these a few years ago purely because of cutting myself open. I find the blades a little bit fiddly, stuff like that. This is the great thing, as soon as it gets a little bit blunt, I just click off the blade, I've got a nice new one ready to go every single time. They're cheap as well, so no problem at all. But as I said, if you are using various blades, then fair enough. Scissors, okay, these famous orange pair of scissors now, I've been using for the best part of 15 years, okay? Still haven't changed them, literally covered in super glue and everything, as you can see. Now, the reason I use these instead of a sprue cutter, okay? You can get a specialist tool which is designed for cutting parts off of the sprue, we'll talk about later on. I just use these. I use these for cutting everything from decals through to metal, through to plastic and everything else in between. Again, they cost me probably around about £5 back then. I don't know what they are now, probably about £7.50, and they've lasted me ever since. Very good investment into those, no problem at all. Okay, we've got here some straight edges. Now, to be honest, this is what I used to use. I keep this as a little bit of reference. This is just a piece of copper sheet, very thin, it's pliable. Okay, now we use this for putting down lines, for rescribing, things like that as a template. I put a little bit of insulating tape on it just so it's easier to grip. I use it, as you can see, got filler on here for filling and everything else. It's just a very old friend of mine that I've had for many, many years now. Nowadays, you can just pick up these guys. Now, this is a tri-set of templates, as you can see. You've got various patterns on them, extremely flexible, so when we're doing rescribing, things like that, we can just use these now. Relatively cheap, again, probably set you back around about £5 to £7, something else like that, okay? Well worth the investment. I've had these now over 10 years and they're still going absolutely fine. Tweezers, we all use these, okay? Your standard type of tweezers you get just like this, okay? We've got these, which are the reverse type, which means they spring on, which are great because then they hold parts, you can put them down, you know, if you've got things drying just like that, and you don't have to hold on to them all the time. So very, very handy thing to have. The other type as well is what we call the locking forceps. Again, these will go in, they lock, they've got a little lock system down here. It holds the parts extremely tight, again, for painting, holding together, anything else like that. So handy little things to have. Tapes, okay. Obviously, you know, you can go out and you can use just plain normal masking tape. We've got one here, this is frog tape, okay, just pretty much anywhere DIY shop. Trouble is, if it's the DIY type stuff, it tends to have problems with it. It's not designed for our type of hobby. You get bleed through with some of them and things like that. The trouble with the frog tape is after a while it loses its tack. This is the low tack version admittedly, which is great for a one-off thing as you're using it. If you leave it overnight, come back to it, perhaps, you know, time commitments, things like that, you're going to have a problem because it will lift around the edges. Tamiya tape has always been my chosen favourite. Readily available in all your hobby shops. prices vary wildly depending where you go, but you can get the refills for these, which you just pop in once you've run out in your tape. Various sizes, 6, 10, and I think it's 18 mil, something else like that. They also do a 40mm version of it as well, which is quite a cost-effective way of doing large areas. Your other thing as well is these guys. This is Jammy Dog tape. This is very, very thin. This is your 1mm version, and this is another version of it. This is 1mm as well, and this is by Micron tape. Again, very handy things to have, as we'll talk about when we move through to painting stages, things like that. We will be using these quite a lot. Making small holes in models, always a thing, okay? Little tiny pin vise. We've got a 1mm little drill bit in the end here. This is one of those, got the freewheeling end on the end, so you can just screw in. It's also reversible, so what you can have, get the bit back out, is turn it round and you've got a larger one in the end. Cost you about £5. To be honest, I've got a couple of these with various size drill bits already set up in them, so I'm just ready to go at any one time. But again, probably set you back about a £5, and definitely well worth the investment, because if you're trying to do it by hand or you're trying to put holes in with using ends of blades, stuff like that, it never really works. It's just easy to have one of these, screw it down. Again, we'll show you all about those a little bit later on. Over here we've got rescribing tools, something I say we're going to cover quite a bit during this. It's one of those things, there's various tools out there and they can cost you a fortune through to nothing at all. What we've got here is just a normal needle which is set into a little holder here, and again you can rescribe like that. Not the best, but great for doing circles, stuff like that, and I readily use it all the time. Your standard type dental type tools, which are readily available, most markets have them. Okay, again, lethally sharp, so be careful with them, but you can scratch down and do various circles. I use this one for circles and tricky corners, edges, things like that. Again, pretty cheap, you can pick them up a couple of pounds, no problem at all. Then you move on to something you might have seen one of these before. This is your standard type P cutter. This is a Tamiya version. There are other ones out there where you have a sort of edge down on this side, and then what happens is you can either push or pull it. We'll talk about it again. Gives you great even lines for scribing. Okay. One of these, a cheaper version of it, single blade. This blade you can change, you get a few spare blades in there. This one is a one-shot wonder, but it is nice. It's got a tiny little point on the end of this guy, and it does do a great job, especially getting in corners. Again, it's a push or pull type, and it has got an edge on it so you can go through. Something, a little bit of luxury as you move through, putting in riveting detail, things like that, you can get one of these. This has got like a sawtooth edge on the end of it. What happens is you wheel it along and it will stab into the plastic, okay, and leave you even spaced and even sized holes, okay, into the plastic, which look like riveting. Now these come with various spare size blades in there for different scales. So this one here is sort of 1/48 scale, and to size wise it probably gives you a rivet sort of every 3 scale inches, something else like that, which is about right. If you were doing bigger ones, you can change the blade over in here to have bigger gaps or smaller gaps, and away you go. Again, dirt cheap. These two, I think they're about £3 each. They're not very expensive at all. And to be honest, don't be fooled by thinking because they're cheap they don't do the trick. Those ones I use almost every single day. Pegs, we've all used them, especially as kids and everything else for modelling. They are just as much in the modelling world as they were before. The only thing I would say is try and get the ones with the little rubber feet on the end, because they will grip weird shapes, especially curves, things like that, a lot better than wooden ones that then tend to ping off, okay? But again, pegs, absolutely. Cocktail sticks, toothpicks, okay, again, amazing, you know, the uses you can use for them, from gluing through to, you know, actually cleaning out parts, cleaning clear parts with them, I'll show you about that, and everything else. So again, cotton buds, as you can imagine, everything you can imagine you use for them all the time. Brushes, to be honest, I don't brush much, as you'll see through this. Interior, small work, absolutely. I don't buy expensive brushes. You know, you do pay for what you get at the end of the day. If you can afford good ones, use good ones and look after them, or buy cheap and throw them away. It's as simple as that. I've got some mediocre ones here. We've got an Italeri flat brush. The flat ones are great because they help you do things, especially like dry brushing, even paint finishes, stuff like that. Your standard sort of, this is a Humbrol round brush, okay, quite a large one, again, no problem at all. And whose is this one? Just trying to see. This is a Creative Models one, very fine one. I would say get yourself a set of flats, medium rounds, okay, and then some fine ones for doing all those detail areas, and that should last you a lifetime, no problem at all. Next up, sanding sponges. Okay, self-promoting, obviously we do make these. Sanding sponge sets. This is set 1, which I would recommend. This has our Polisher, okay, this is great for doing polishing just general plastic, clear parts, everything else like that. You'll see about that in the video. So it comes in a protective cover. You've got a very fine side on the blue, and the white basically will make it like a mirror, anything you do with it. Very, very good. Down in here, we've got our blue foam one, absolutely great for standard stuff. It's a very soft foam. Don't think this is just something that you use like nail files or anything else. It's specially developed by myself that we use these that are great for doing these types of things. As I said, they're very soft, so it won't make flat spots on your models. You'll see about it later. Both sides are the same. The black one is a polisher variety. This one is like wet and dry paper, as you probably know it. Yes, you can use it wet and dry as well. It's a little bit more coarse on one side. This is very much the fine side. So between all three, you won't need anything else to do. Those are available $4.95 from us. You can get them online, even cheaper through our stockists. I've seen them down as low as £4 in the past. Set number 12, this is the skinny set. Okay, this is something that I invented many years ago, and down in here you will get two of our entire range. So actually we have the white one you'll see here is very, very coarse, great for everyday sanding. Okay, we have a blue that comes along which is medium. Okay, they're both different grits each side as well. So you've got a coarser medium one, and then it goes to quite a fine, and then you have a green which is our fine one, which is the green, probably the one you'll use the most. All right, right the way through there. Then we have skinny versions of the sanders as well. So we've got the blue, you've got two of those, and you've got the black as well. Great thing about these, and whilst I invented them many years ago, is that they get into small areas. You're not sanding areas you don't need to, and we'll show you about using those in there, but really, really handy. And again, a set like that is $4.95. You can get them £4.50 on the internet through various stockists. A set like that will also probably last you a lifetime, as will the other ones. They are all self-cleaning, and you can wash them in water as well if you need to. That is the set that I use every day, okay? Again, when you look at my tools behind me, I've got drawers full of them and everything else. Do I use them? Not every day, okay? A lot of them are tools where I've bought, I thought they were a good idea. I've never used them particularly much. This is what I use every single day, okay? Now, moving through, glues, okay? Various types on the market. You probably all remember this particular one. This is your Humbrol type poly cement. This is the one that's the clear stuff that comes out and stringy. We all used it as a kid. It's not any better now, if we're honest. It's still horrible stuff to use. Okay, it's not as precise. One of the biggest innovations in the hobby over the last sort of 5 to 10 years especially has been the glues and the way they work and everything else. Nowadays you can get contact glues. This is weld action stuff. So what happens is you brush it on the parts, it physically melts everything together. This is Revell's contactor glue. You get a little brush down in here, and it's some way between being a liquid, so it's quite runny, as he says, tipping it everywhere, to this stuff. So it's about in between the two. He says, if you don't mind, I'll just grab a cloth to clear this off the desk before it eats into your cutting mat, because that's the other stuff it will do. Other things you can get is these guys. Now, these are probably the two most common in the UK and probably in the US. This is Tamiya Extra Thin, which is the stuff I use every single day. If you can't get hold of that, you can use this stuff. Now, this is Mr. Cement S, okay, from Mr. Hobby. Okay, both Japanese companies. Roughly they do the same thing. What it is a brush on a very fine point, as you can see here. It's a weld action. So what happens is you bring both parts together, you brush it over the top, it will weld them solid. It penetrates down in, softens the plastic, and makes the plastic bond together, making a far stronger join than certainly these two over here, which are basically just holding, the glue is the bit in between, okay? It's holding everything together. These, it's just melting the plastic, welds them in. The great thing about them, as we'll show you shortly, is when we're slapping it around all over your model and everything else, as long as you don't touch it and dry naturally, it won't leave a mark. It all evaporates off, so it's not like you're leaving glue behind like you used to with those when you were using those glues and things like that. Mr. S Cement works just the same as the Tamiya one. It's just personal choice. For me, I've always used Tamiya. I've used it for the last 10 years exclusively. There was a problem getting Tamiya in the UK, especially extra thin, so you can use Mr. S. Will work just equally as well. They're a little bit different. There's a few things in the smells, things like that. Super glue, as you can imagine, it's still great today as it used to be. Little things as well, Kicker. Kicker is just an activator. You put a little bit of super glue down, you can squirt it with this stuff, it will go off immediately, okay? It sets everything completely rock hard. So if you're gonna do it, I use Zap-A-Glat Medium. I use the Vital Bond. I find the Vital Bond doesn't leave any white marks. Some of the ones you use, like Zap-A-Gats, can use white dusty marks all over your model once you've finished it. The Vital Bond, I find, leaves nothing behind whatsoever. So as I say, a super glue and a Kicker for that, a real handy thing to have, and I'll show you about that because you can also use it as a filler, okay, which is something we'll talk about later. Fillers themselves, okay, you've got your standard putty type, okay, that's what we've all had over the years. You now get water-based putty types as well. This one's quite a nice one. This is Plastic Putty by Vallejo. It's very precise. It's got a little tiny needle on the end. You can put a tiny bit in there and away you go. The drawback to it is shrinkage, okay? All putties tend to shrink back over time, so you have to refill, things like that. A new boy on the market we've been using really just in the last few months now is Deluxe Models Perfect Plastic Putty. Absolutely great stuff. I find it gives me a great effect, minimal shrinkage. It's easily clean upable with water, so you can just wipe it away once you finish with it, unlike something else perhaps like the Green Putty by which is MMD stuff. You do tend to find that you need quite a harsh chemical to break it down to wipe it off. This stuff just wipes away with water, so it's very, very easy to clean up after it. Because when you're using any type of putty, you just want to do the area you need. You don't want to be doing big areas and ended up having to clean up after and rescribe and things like that because you made a mess with the putties. So that's basically it. As I said, don't be intimidated by massive workstations full of paints and everything else like that. Tool chests, as I've got, full of tools, because at the end of the day, just buy what you're comfortable with. Set yourself out with a few basic tools and you're good to go. Literally a hobby knife, I would say a pair of tweezers, a pair of scissors, some type of scribing tool, okay, some brushes, some pegs, and some glues. A little bit of putty perhaps and you're good to go, okay? And that's really all you need. You can expand your tool range over time. Sanders, various things. We do sanding sheets here at Flory Models, all these different items. You're probably not going to need them for your first, as you're coming back to the hobby, everything else. You can get your luxuries and build up your sets as you go right the way through. I've been building mine up now for the last 30 years and we're to this level now. It's probably overkill completely. As you see, a lot of these paints, we'll be talking about that in later videos. You know, you don't need to buy hundreds of sets of paints and all the rest of it. Just buy what you need and then expand over time. And as you'll find, different manufacturers do different types of paints for different types of eras. So perhaps if you're into aircraft, World War II, you'd be quite happy with the sort of Tamiya range. If you're talking more modern stuff, things like that, you might want to go along with the Mr. Hobby Color range, very nice paints. And then we've got Vallejo, who sort of do everybody's up the top, which we'll be talking about a little bit later on in the shows. So anyway, we'll get all this cleared away and then we're going to have a chat about the actual kits themselves. Okay, so next up, the kits themselves. Perhaps you've been in a shop or online and you're greeted by a scene like this, fantastic box art sort of, you know, inspiring you to build these great models. Perhaps you've been to a show and you've seen the models down and you think, right, okay, that's for me. Various things you need to know about them first. First of all, scale. Okay, not necessarily important, but you should know this is a 1/72 scale Spitfire. And this is the same Spitfire in 1/32. Obviously, big scales need a little bit more room. Normally, the bigger scales as well, especially nowadays, are a lot more detailed. So something like this, £5, something like that as a kit is over £100. Okay, just be aware, the more you scale up, the more complexity in the kit. We'll talk about various manufacturers and pricing and everything in a moment. Certainly though, don't be put off because you get other things like this. This is a Revell Hawk that we've done. It's one of my favorite kits. It's only £15. You can find them online as low as £7, I've seen it. So you think, you know, when you look at the size difference, you know, the price is nothing, okay? Other things you can get is things like this. This is a Focke-Wulf by a company called Eduard. They do great detail sets and everything else, and they tend to come with the kit, so you get a lot of detail in there. Probably not something you're going to be looking to do with your first models. Whoops. You'll be probably looking to do something which is a little bit more sort of basic, so you can sort of hone your skills of gluing, filling, rescribing and everything. So when you sort of move those skills forward, when you come onto the paint phase, your paintwork will look a lot better. Armour as well. This is a 1/35 scale Merkava tank, pretty much your standard size tank and everything else, quite a nice chunky size. But obviously you can go down in scales just the same as you can with aircraft. Most people tend to build the mid-size aircraft, so we're talking 1/48 scale aircraft, which most of these kits are here. 1/32 stuff can get very big and very expensive very quickly. So if we have a quick look around here, we're going to be starting with our builds with something like the good old-fashioned Airfix Spitfire. Things to remember: check your kits to make sure what you're getting inside the box. There's some very old nasty kits in brand new shiny boxes out there, so just be careful. Check on Flory Models to make sure it's what we call a new tool kit, which means it will have recessed panel lines. The chances are it's been CAD designed. It will go together very well with a minimum of effort. And no need for real heady modifications and things like that really to get it together, because all too often there are manufacturers out there which will happily take your money by putting them into a nice flashy new box and everything else like that, you know, which has got an old kit in there which dates back to the 60s, 70s, things like that, which are going to be a problem to go together and give you problems as a new modeler coming along. Some of the manufacturers we want to talk about: Airfix. If you're in the UK, you've obviously heard of them. Yes, they're still going. Owned by Hornby these days, got great level of investment, and they are really moving on now. Yes, some of their old kits were terrible. Yes, they do still sell them. That's what I'm on about with reboxing. So just make sure you get what you know you're paying for. Make sure you do a little bit of research first if you're not sure what exactly is in the box, or certainly if you're into a hobby shop, just ask to open up the box or ask the opinion of the store holder. I'm sure he'll be able to fill you in on that. Revell over here. German company, all now in the US unfortunately, but certainly a great manufacturer. They do some great pricing. We were talking about this Revell Hawk 1/32 scale, £15, absolute bargain, and is probably my favourite aircraft of all time in any scale, purely because of the price. It is a lot of plastic for your money. They do tend to be quite good detail. Their fit is pretty much spot on, and you don't tend to, there is again always exceptions to the rule, you don't get old kits anymore. They tend to be all new tool, everything else. Again, check your references as you move through. Now we have got a few ones you might not see every day. Meng, okay, specialising in armour, but they do aircraft as well. Extremely accurate models, okay? Pretty much you can build them straight out of the box and they will be exact replicas of the real thing. Not the cheapest on the world, but you know, they are very nice kits. Great Wall, again, fantastic, very accurate kits. Not the cheapest on the world. Great level of detail right the way through in there. Because they're a relatively new kit, you don't tend to get any reboxing with them, so you shouldn't have any problems with any of their kits. Got to speak about them. This is probably the father of scale modelling. This is Tamiya. Now Tamiya have been around now many years. They're one of the earliest manufacturers of model kits in the world. They're from Japan, and they do a level of detail which is the benchmark for all scale modelling. Most of the companies out there are chasing Tamiya for their quality, their detail, and certainly their attention to detail with the way that the kits go together, the engineering and everything else like that. But all this does come at a price, quite a high one normally. This particular kit here is £100, okay? Some of their other kits can go up to £200, it's quite easily. Lots of aftermarket details out there available for all of these kits, but certainly that's probably one that you'll see. Other ones here, the Zukamori one. This is a fully detailed internal and external, right the way down to the pistons inside the engines that you'll never see. £250. Okay, so you are talking big commitments in money, but it could take you a year to build it. So I still think it's still a cheap hobby. Other manufacturers out there, we've got Hobby Boss over there, we have Kinetic and everything else like that. Great manufacturers bringing out good quality kits, reasonably priced, okay, and they go together very well, so you shouldn't have any problems with all those at all. As I said, just watch your scaling, because obviously some things are huge. You know, a 72nd Spitfire like this, you know, something like that. If you're talking a modern fighter in 72nd, like a flanker, it will be this big. So then when you upscale that to a 32nd Su-27, it's going to be this big. They are absolutely huge aircraft, okay? So just be careful where you're going to put it afterwards and everything else. I'm one of these people, I teach here obviously, And people say that should you start on a simple 1/72 scale kit? You can do. You know, it gets the fundamentals down of doing things like gluing, filling, rescribing, and obviously the great thing is they come together in minutes, you know, versus something like these bigger kits, they take days to come together before you sort of see any movement. Okay, but don't be put off, you know, start quite happily with a 1/48 scale kit. Pick a kit that's a rough price. Okay, as a rough price, a modern 1/48 scale aircraft gonna set you back around about 30 to 50 pounds, okay, from various manufacturers, from Revell, Airfix, Hobby Boss, things like that, okay. Other kit manufacturers obviously going to charge you a little bit more, but the quality will be there, so certainly Tamiya, something like that, Eduard, things like that, they're going to be a little bit more expensive because you do tend to get all the finer details which do come obviously at a price. For us personally, we're going to be talking about doing some 72nd scale kits just to start with, to get us going and moving on. As soon as you've seen those, perhaps you want to move on a little bit more, please have a look at the Flory Models site. We've got in there over 700 videos now on building. All the ones you can see here are full builds actually on the site. So what we're going to do is get all this cleared away and we're going to start building some models.